A Washington, D.C. socialite with secret ties to the White House and the CIA, gunned down in broad daylight on a quiet Georgetown footpath. The 1964 murder of Mary Pinchot Meyers has gone unsolved for over 60 years. A case brimming with Cold War intrigue, whispered affairs, and a mysterious diary that vanished into smoke. Was this simply a random act of violence, or a she knew too much conspiracy reaching the highest levels of power? The truth lies entangled in the life she led and the secrets she took to the grave. Mary Pinchot Meyers was born into privilege on October 14, 1920, the elder of two daughters in a prominent Pennsylvania family. Her father, Amos Pinchot, was a wealthy progressive lawyer, and her mother, Ruth Pinchot, a journalist. Connections that made Mary a true American aristocrat. Educated at the finest schools, a debutante, basically an American princess. Raised amid Park Avenue affluence and political idealism, Mary grew into an intelligent, free-spirited young woman. In 1935, as a Brearley school student, she even met a teenage John F. Kennedy at a prep school dance. Legend has it the confident Jack cut in on her date on the Choate dance floor. It was an early brush with a future president, hinting at the intersections her life would later have with history. After graduating Vassar College in 1942, Mary dabbled in journalism and the arts. But her life took a conventional turn when she married Cord Meyer in 1945. Cord was a decorated World War II veteran and an idealist who crusaded for world peace, values Mary shared at first. The young couple moved to Cambridge, had 3 sons, and Mary devoted herself to home and family, while Cord Meyer's career veered in a dramatic direction. In 1951, Cord joined the newly formed CIA, thrusting Mary into the orbit of Cold War covert operations. She wasn't privy to classified details, but she grasped enough to grow wary. By the mid-1950s, as Cord rose through CIA ranks, Mary quietly grew critical of the agency's secret wars and macho culture, a tension that strained their marriage. Tragedy compounded the rift. In 1956, their middle son, 9-year-old Michael, was struck by a car and killed outside their Virginia home. Grief devastated the couple. Mary filed for divorce in 1958, alleging extreme cruelty, mental in nature, and citing a collapse of happiness. The once idealistic wartime sweethearts went their separate ways. Cord deeper into clandestine CIA work, and Mary determined to forge a new identity on her own terms. Newly single at 38, Mary moved into a cozy artist studio in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., eager to pursue painting full-time. She soon became a familiar figure in the Georgetown salon scene. Elegant, bohemian, and outspoken. Her younger sister Antoinette Toni Pinchot had married Ben Bradley, a prominent Newsweek editor and future Washington Post editor. Through the Bradleys, Mary mingled with Washington's elite. Coincidentally, her new home was just around the corner from the residence of then-Senator John Kennedy and his wife Jacqueline "Jackie" Kennedy. The families were friendly neighbors. Jackie and Mary even took morning walks together along the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal towpath, the same scenic route Mary would continue to stroll almost every day. It wasn't long before Mary's path crossed with John F. Kennedy again, in a far more intimate way. Before we dive into the case, we've got something really interesting to show you. Ever wondered what the internet really knows about you? I recently ran my own name through Whitebridge AI, an AI-powered tool that scans your entire digital footprint across 30-plus trusted data sources. And the report? Kind of mind-blowing. It found old social media profiles I forgot existed, media mentions I didn't know were out there, even some sketchy uses of my name I would have never caught without it. Whitebridge isn't just for curiosity. It's used for sales prep, online reputation checks, recruitment, even cybersecurity. Whether you're a business owner, a content creator, or just someone who wants to stay informed, this thing's worth a look. Check everything about you using get.whitebridge.ai/badthings and get 25% off your first report with our code BADTHINGS. You'll find the link right at the top of the description, and I've also pinned it in the comments. Now, let's get into the case. By 1961, after JFK was elected president, Mary and JFK had rekindled their old acquaintance into a secret romance. While history remembers Marilyn Monroe or Judith Exner, those who knew Mary say she was different. A painter and freethinker who bonded with Kennedy on an intellectual level. She visited the White House frequently, usually when Jackie was away, appearing so often in the official visitor logs that JFK's aide Maya Feldman later quipped, "Mary was almost a part of the furniture." The affair remained discreet. As Ben Bradley recalled, "We had heard reports of presidential infidelity, but knew of no evidence at the time." In private, however, Mary's diary entries and later testimony from friends would reveal that her relationship with JFK was passionate and meaningful, perhaps even influential on his views. Mary's influence on the president, if any, stemmed from her evolving avant-garde interests. She was dabbling with LSD and marijuana well before the 60s psychedelic revolution hit the mainstream. In April 1962, Mary paid a visit to Harvard psychologist Timothy Leary, then at the forefront of psychedelic research. Leary later recounted that Mary asked him to teach her how to run guided LSD sessions, because, as she confided, "I have this friend who's a very important man. He wants to try it himself." Leary supplied Mary with a few doses of LSD, and she returned to Washington. According to Leary, Mary believed that turning on powerful men to LSD's mind-expanding effects might spark revelations that could end world conflict. Whether President Kennedy ever actually experimented with LSD under Mary's guidance remains unproven, but it's clear she introduced him to new ideas. At the very least, they smoked marijuana together on at least one occasion, as would later emerge from second-hand reports. Mary was ahead of her time in terms of modern art, personal style, using marijuana and LSD, very much a precursor to the culture of the 1960s, notes biographer Nina Burley. In the buttoned-up world of DC politics, Mary Pinchot Meyer was a bohemian breath of fresh air. Then, in November 1963, John F. Kennedy's assassination shattered Mary's world. She was devastated by Jack's death, and almost immediately suspicious about the official story behind it. Leary recalled that soon after JFK was killed, he received a frantic, sobbing phone call from Mary. They couldn't control him anymore. He was changing too fast. Mary cried to Leary. "They've covered everything up. I gotta come see you. I'm afraid." These haunting words, allegedly spoken by Mary in late 1963, suggest she believed they, whoever they were, had silenced the president because he was moving toward peace. For example, seeking détente with the Soviets. Mary feared that dark forces had covered up the truth about Dallas. Friends later said that in the months after JFK's assassination, Mary became outspokenly critical of the CIA and the Warren Commission's conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. She told confidants that she felt she was being watched. In fact, during the final year of her life, Mary confided to friends that she suspected break-ins at her home. She would come home to find things disturbed, as if someone had been rifling through her private papers. Still, fearless by nature, Mary refused to live in paranoia. She continued her routine of painting in the mornings and taking long walks at lunchtime. But by the fall of 1964, those routines were being carefully observed by someone lurking in the shadows. October 12, 1964, nearly 1 year after JFK's death, dawned as a crisp, bright Monday in Washington. That day, 43-year-old Mary Meyer spent the morning in her Georgetown art studio, then around noon set out on her usual walk along the C&O Canal towpath. The towpath was a tree-lined pedestrian trail between the canal and the Potomac River, a tranquil route Mary loved and walked daily. At approximately 12:30 p.m., as Mary ambled past the golden autumn foliage, two loud cracks echoed across the water. A mechanic working on a nearby car, Henry Wiggins, heard a woman scream for help, punctuated by two gunshots in quick succession. Wiggins rushed to a low wall overlooking the towpath and saw a shocking sight. A woman grappling with a man, then collapsing to the ground. He saw a woman struggling with a man on the towpath, then a man leaning over the woman, the Washington Post reported the next day. The assailant appeared to pocket something, possibly a gun, then sprinted down the embankment toward the Potomac River. Mary Pinchot Meyer lay curled on the path, blood seeping into the dirt from two point-blank bullet wounds, one to her back and one execution-style to her head. A passerby who came upon the scene later remarked that Mary's body looked strangely peaceful, as if sleeping, except for the neat bullet hole behind her ear. Police arrived within minutes, swarming the area. They quickly initiated a canvass of the towpath and riverbank, forming a dragnet along the water. About 40 minutes after the shooting, an officer spotted a young African-American man emerging from the woods by the river, less than a quarter-mile away. The man was Raymond Ray Crump, Jr., a 25-year-old laborer. Crump's clothes were soaking wet, and he had a fresh cut on his hand. He claimed he'd been fishing and fell in the water, trying to retrieve a dropped fishing pole. It was a doubtful story, especially when Wiggins identified Crump as the same man he had seen moments earlier standing over Mary's fallen body. Police fished a dark jacket and cap out of the canal that matched what Wiggins described the killer wearing. No gun was found on Crump, but officers suspected he had ditched a firearm in the river or along the shore. Despite searches, the murder weapon never turned up. Under heavy suspicion, Roy Crump Jr. was arrested and charged with homicide less than an hour after Mary's murder. The crime shocked Georgetown high society. That evening, Mary's brother-in-law, Ben Bradley, got a phone call no family member ever wants to receive. A police official summoned Bradley to the D.C. morgue, where he was faced with identifying Mary's body. Bradley was shattered. She had 100,000 friends, a distraught acquaintance told reporters, reflecting on the vivacious artist's wide social circle. Incredibly, it was only after Mary's death that those closest to her learned of some of her deepest secrets. Neither Bradley nor Mary's sister Toni had known about Mary's affair with President Kennedy until after the murder, when clues began to surface. And one very important clue was lurking in Mary's studio, a private diary she had kept, documenting intimate details of her life. That diary would become the center of a post-mortem mystery of its own. The night of Mary's murder, as Bradley and Toni steeled themselves to sort through Mary's personal effects, an unsettling scene unfolded. Arriving at Mary's art studio, which was on the Bradley property, to look for the diary, Bradley was startled to find a familiar figure already there. James Jesus Angleton, chief of CIA counterintelligence, and an old friend of the Meyers. Angleton was crouched at the studio's door, lock-picking tools in hand. He had been urgently trying to gain entry. Angleton sheepishly admitted he was searching for Mary's diary to protect Jack's reputation, referring to President Kennedy. Bradley ushered him out, and eventually, Ben and Toni managed to locate the diary hidden in a metal box in the studio. Over the next 2 days, they read Mary's handwritten pages by the glow of a desk lamp. In them, Mary spoke of her love affair with JFK, without naming him explicitly, and perhaps other personal musings. After some deliberation, Toni handed the diary over to Angleton, trusting him to destroy it. But Angleton did not. More than a decade later, Tony discovered that Angleton had secretly kept the diary hidden in a CIA safe. Only then, in the late 1970s, did she retrieve it and burn it herself, page by page, in her fireplace. Despite the braying of the knee-jerks about some public right to know, Bradley later said, "We felt Mary's diary was deeply personal and not for public consumption." In July 1965, the homicide case against Ray Crump Jr. went to trial in Washington. It was a sensational courtroom drama. On one side, a young black defendant with a third-grade education. On the other, the family and friends of a murdered blue blood socialite, including CIA witnesses and Washington insiders. Civil rights attorney Dovie Johnson Roundtree, one of the first black women to argue a major case in D.C., defended Crump with fierce determination. Roundtree picked apart the prosecution's thin evidence. There were no fingerprints, no murder weapon, no blood on Crump's clothes, nothing forensically tying Crump to the crime. The eyewitness accounts were questionable too. Henry Wiggins admitted he'd only glimpsed the attacker from a distance, and another witness, an Army lieutenant who claimed to have seen Crump trailing Mary earlier, described a man larger in build than Crump. Roundtree even demonstrated that Crump was 50 pounds lighter and 5 inches shorter than the man Wiggins initially described. After a tense trial, the jury found reasonable doubt impossible to ignore. On July 29, 1965, Ray Crump Jr. was acquitted of all charges. The 25-year-old broke into tears of relief as the verdict was read, while Mary's loved ones were left with the agony of no conviction for her murder. Mary Pinchot Meyers' case thus slipped into the realm of Washington legend, officially unsolved and, for a time, largely forgotten by the public. In the immediate aftermath, other major events dominated headlines. President Johnson's 1964 election, Cold War crises, and Mary's death faded from front pages. But those who knew the tangled threads of Mary's life could not forget. Here was a woman who had been at the crossroads of American power, married to a CIA official, confidant and lover to a president, friendly with journalists and diplomats, suddenly cut down under bizarre circumstances. Over the years, whispers grew louder that something was amiss in the story of her death. By the mid-1970s, sensational fragments of Mary's story had emerged, including her White House affair and her experiments with LSD, sparking new interest. A former Washington Post reporter, James Truitt, even told National Enquirer in 1976 that Mary and JFK had smoked marijuana together and that Mary kept a personal diary of her meetings with the president. The once private tragedy now had the makings of a modern myth, complete with conspiratorial undertones. Mary's friend Anne Truitt, James Truitt's wife, had tried to warn the Bradleys to secure Mary's diary the night of the murder, suggesting Mary had confided in her about sensitive matters. And what about Jim Angleton, the CIA man caught literally picking the lock to get that diary? To many, these pieces didn't add up to a simple mugging or random crime. Mary Meyers' death was officially unresolved, but it was her extraordinary life that kept people asking questions. The stage was set for a multitude of theories, from the mundane to the fantastical, to fill the void left by an absence of justice. In the decades since 1964, Mary Pinchot Meyers' unsolved murder has become fertile ground for speculation. Who killed Mary, really? Was Ray Crump set up? By whom? Why? As one retrospective article bluntly put it, what follows are the most talked about theories, from the official account to the farthest fringes of the conspiracy spectrum. Each tries to answer the same haunting question: why would anyone want Mary Meyers dead? The random attacker, The most straightforward explanation is that Mary was the victim of a random act of violence. In this view, Ray Crump Jr. really was the culprit, or if not Crump, then some other unknown assailant who happened upon Mary that day. Prosecutors in 1965 argued that Crump may have intended to rob or sexually assault Mary, a crime of opportunity that turned deadly when she resisted. Indeed, the initial police assumption was that the motive was robbery. Mary had been walking alone, an attractive middle-aged woman in an isolated area. A predator might have seen an easy target. Supporters of this theory point to Crump's suspicious behavior, wet clothes and flimsy alibi, the eyewitness seeing him leaning over the body, and Crump's own troubled history. Nina Burley, who researched Mary's life extensively, ultimately concluded that Crump was entirely capable of violent behavior and likely did kill Mary. She cites his post-trial criminal record, which included arson and a sexual assault, as evidence that the jury may have let a dangerous man go free. Even writer Lance Morrow, who was on the scene as a young reporter, later wrote, "Given the witness statements and Crump's instability, I believe the jury erred in acquitting him. In other words, a disturbed individual killed Mary Meyer in a spur-of-the-moment attack. There was no grand plot, just a senseless murder and a murderer who walked away due to lack of proof. This theory requires no shadowy agencies or elaborate schemes, just tragic bad luck. Mary crossed paths with the wrong person at the wrong time. Yet many find the random crime narrative deeply unsatisfying. Mary's background was anything but random, and it raises the question, what are the odds her killer just happened to be a stranger? As one commentator wryly observed, it would be a heck of a coincidence that a random attacker chose a victim who turned out to be the niece of a Pennsylvania governor, the ex-wife of a high-level CIA man, and the lover of a slain president. That staggering coincidence fuels alternative theories that Mary was targeted for who she was and what or whom she knew. Indeed, several aspects of the crime suggested a professional touch rather than a bungled robbery. Mary was killed execution style, 2 precise shots, including one to the head at close range, and nothing was stolen from her. The timing was also chillingly conspicuous. Just 2 days after the Warren Commission report on JFK's assassination was made public, Mary Meyer was herself shot dead. Mary had openly challenged the Warren Commission's lone gunman conclusion, which to some was a risky stance. Could that really be coincidence? Many think not. CIA conspiracy. By far the most popular theory is that Mary Pinchot Meyer was assassinated, silenced by the CIA or allied forces, in a cover-up that connects to JFK's death. In this scenario, Mary knew too much for her own good. What exactly she knew is up for debate. Perhaps incriminating secrets about the CIA, knowledge of JFK's policies or intentions to seek peace, or inside information on the truth behind Kennedy's assassination. Any of these could have marked her as a threat. Proponents of the CIA theory often quote a remark that author C. David Heyman claimed came from Mary's ex-husband, Cord Meyer. On his deathbed in 2001, Cord Meyer supposedly muttered that the same son of bitches that killed John F. Kennedy were responsible for Mary's murder. If true, that explosive allegation directly implicates a shadowy cabal. Many assume CIA operatives, eliminating Mary as a loose end. Similarly, investigative writer Leo DeMoore argued that Ray Crump was the perfect patsy, better even than Lee Harvey Oswald. Mary Meyer was killed by a well-trained professional hitman, very likely somebody connected to the CIA, precisely because she knew too much for her own good. These claims, though unprovable, neatly weave Mary's fate into the broader tapestry of 1960s conspiracy. The idea that powerful figures in government might have orchestrated JFK's assassination, and then, fearful that Mary could blow the whistle, orchestrated hers as well. Those who suspect a CIA hit point to a number of suspicious details. First, Mary had been an outspoken critic of the CIA after her divorce, which likely put her on the agency's radar. In fact, it had been reported, and was referenced in a recent podcast investigation, that the CIA had Mary's phone tapped in 1964. If true, that indicates she was being surveilled, perhaps due to her high-level connections, or her suspected knowledge of sensitive matters. Second, the immediate cover-up behavior after Mary's death raises eyebrows. Why was James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's counterintelligence chief, so desperate to retrieve Mary's diary the very night of her murder, even before her next of kin could? Angleton claimed it was to protect JFK's reputation by destroying evidence of the affair. But conspiracy researchers wonder if the diary might have contained far more, perhaps references to LSD experiments, peace initiatives, or Mary's suspicions about Dallas. The fact that Angleton lied about burning the diary, he secretly kept it for years until confronted by Tony Bradley in the late 1970s, only adds to the intrigue. Finally, the method of the killing itself suggests a skilled perpetrator. Mary was killed outdoors in a public place, yet the killer left behind not a shred of forensic evidence and vanished almost without a trace. That sort of clean job is consistent, theories argue, with a professional assassin rather than an impulsive mugger. A number of researchers, including Peter Janney, author of Mary's Mosaic, have even tried to identify who the hitman might have been. One line of speculation focuses on the unidentified African-American man whom witnesses other than Crump reported seeing in the vicinity, possibly implying a second man was involved and Crump was meant to take the fall. Another suspicion falls on Lieutenant William L. Mitchell, the Army officer who claimed he saw Crump trailing Mary shortly before the murder. Mitchell only came forward a day later, and some have noted that his physical appearance, a fit, medium-statured man, actually matched Wiggins' initial description of the killer better than Crump did. Could Lieutenant Mitchell have been an operative playing the dual role of assassin and helpful witness? In essence, the CIA conspiracy boils down to this. Mary Meyer was eliminated deliberately, either out of revenge, if one entertains the notion that certain CIA individuals hated her ex-husband Cord Meyer, or her for her anti-establishment views, or as a preventative measure because she knew too much. As Nina Burley summarizes, the theory is that she had to die because she knew too much. The LSD and peace theory. A fascinating offshoot of the CIA hypothesis centers on Mary's psychedelic advocacy and her influence on JFK's peace initiatives. This theory posits that Mary had been turning on influential men, including JFK, with LSD and marijuana, in hopes of expanding their consciousness and fostering global peace. There's evidence Mary truly believed in this mission. Timothy Leary's accounts and Mary's own actions support it. And indeed, 1963 saw Kennedy pursuing back-channel peace feelers with Soviet leader Khrushchev and plans to wind down the Vietnam War. Exactly the kind of moves that would alarm the military-industrial complex. Some conspiracists theorize that Mary's LSD influence changed JFK, steering him towards dovish policies, and that CIA hardliners or military hawks decided both Kennedy and Mary had to be removed as a result. In support of this, they cite Mary's distraught call to Leary after Dallas. They couldn't control him anymore. He was changing too fast. They've covered everything up. In her grief, Mary clearly suggested that they, perhaps CIA or other insiders, killed Kennedy because he'd slipped out of their control. If Mary truly believed that, she was a dangerous person to leave alive, a walking link between JFK's secret LSD experimentation and the accusation that his own government plotted against him. One chilling anecdote. According to Leary, Mary hinted she herself might be in danger. "I'm afraid," she told him in that same conversation. Advocates of this theory see Mary's murder as the second act of the JFK assassination. First the president, then within the year his confidant, who might have exposed the plot. It dovetails with the CIA theory, but specifically highlights Mary's role in the 1960s cultural battleground over psychedelics and war. Notably, the CIA itself was secretly experimenting with LSD during this era, MKUltra and other programs. So Mary's independent efforts with psychedelics could have been seen as a wild card. If Mary was known to be urging the president toward reconciliation with the Soviets, and possibly even guiding him through drug-induced consciousness expansion, that could paint a target on her back from those who wanted a more aggressive Cold War stance. This theory is admittedly speculative, reliant on a lot of what-ifs, but it remains a popular subject on forums and in books by authors like Peter Janney. Other speculations. Beyond these primary theories, there are additional permutations and rumors. Some armchair sleuths suggest Mary's ex-husband Cord Meyer might have indirectly had a hand in it. Not that Cord would harm the mother of his children, but rather that certain CIA colleagues of Cord's, loyal to him or to the agency, could have taken it upon themselves to solve a problem like Mary without his knowledge. Indeed, Cord Meyer's CIA boss at the time was legendary spy master Allen Dulles, who also sat on the Warren Commission. This overlapping web of relationships fuels conjecture that Mary stumbled onto some classified truth about JFK's assassination through her connections. However, it must be stressed there's no hard evidence Cord or Dulles or any specific official ordered a hit on Mary. Only circumstantial coincidences. Others wonder if Mary's murder might have been a personal vendetta unrelated to espionage. Could she have had a jealous lover or offended someone in her social circle? Mary did engage in other affairs, for instance with artist Kenneth Noland in the late 50s, but no evidence points to any lover, spurned or otherwise, plotting her demise. No suspicious exes or enraged spouses emerged as suspects, and Mary was widely liked in Georgetown. She wasn't known to have enemies. On the internet, true crime forums like Web Sleuths and Reddit have kept Mary's case alive, often favoring the conspiratorial angle. Commenters note the hallmarks of a sanctioned hit, the broad daylight shooting, the apparent attempt to frame an easy patsy, Crump, and the immediate sealing up of loose ends. Based on the scene, it sounds like a pro-hit. Considering her past, there is no lack of suspects among government agencies, one Web Sleuth's user observed, echoing a common sentiment. Another remarked bluntly, "It looks like a hit, and with powerful people behind it, no one will bother to investigate." On Reddit's JFK conspiracy boards, Mary is frequently discussed as the woman who knew too much. Users there recount Leary's claims and even portray Mary as a heroic figure who was a rare dreamer fighting the tides of a corrupt system. In these discussions, Mary's murder is rarely seen as an isolated crime. It's a piece of a larger puzzle involving CIA spies, assassins, and Cold War secrets. Such forums also highlight lingering anomalies. For instance, the FBI's role in the investigation. It later came out that the FBI had quietly assisted DC police and that a lab report showing no forensic link from Crump to the crime was withheld from Crump's defense at trial. That kind of suppression, while possibly just bureaucratic bungling, is catnip to theorists who view it as evidence of a high-level cover-up. In summary, the theories about Mary Pinchot Meyer's death run the gamut. Was it a random lone attacker or a calculated execution? A violent street crime or an espionage elimination? So, after all the intrigue, what most likely happened in the murder of Mary Pinchot Meyer? Let's analyze the case by the evidence and common sense, applying a bit of Occam's razor to cut through the more outlandish assumptions. First, consider means and opportunity. Mary was killed in a public place at midday, with witnesses hearing her cries and gunshots. This was not a silenced, undetected assassination in the dead of night. It was brazen and risky. If the CIA or any professional hit team had orchestrated it, they chose a surprisingly conspicuous method. Assassins tend to favor stealth and certainty. A staged accident, a covert poisoning, or at least a cleaner getaway. Shooting Mary on a towpath at lunch, risking that she might cry out, which she did, and that witnesses might intervene, doesn't scream professional operation. Moreover, the supposed plan to frame Ray Crump was far from foolproof. Crump was discovered almost by happenstance. He wasn't a convincingly planted fall guy. Had the plan been to frame him neatly, one would expect the murder weapon to be found in his possession or some clear link, which wasn't the case. These factors make a highly organized hit possible, but comparatively complex. By contrast, a lone assailant scenario fits the chaos. An attacker, whether Crump or someone like him, confronts Mary. Things turn violent, 2 shots ring out, and a panicked perpetrator flees headlong into the woods. It's messy, risky, and exactly how impulsive crimes often unfold. In terms of means, Crump or any local thug could certainly obtain a handgun and lie in wait on the secluded towpath. He wouldn't need the sophistication of a spy, just the element of surprise and a willingness to shoot. And unfortunately, Mary's habit of walking alone made the opportunity available to anyone watching her routine. Now, motive. This is where the conspiracy theories are compelling. Mary did move in a world of secrets and had acquaintances in covert circles. The CIA or conspirators would have a clear motive if Mary truly posed a threat to expose something earth-shattering, say involvement in JFK's assassination or other CIA misdeeds. But what is the evidence that she was about to do so? Mary was an artist and socialite, not an investigative journalist or a whistleblower with a platform. Her skepticism about the Warren Commission was largely shared in private conversations, not on the public stage. It's telling that after her death, no explosive revelation from Mary ever came to light. Her diary, once recovered, revealed an affair. Juicy gossip, yes, but not a national security breach. According to Ben Bradley, nothing in it suggested Mary had proof of a conspiracy. It was personal, not political. If Mary truly knew too much, eliminating her might make sense to conspirators. But if all she had were suspicions and intimate anecdotes, murdering her would be an extreme and unnecessary response. The CIA motive shrinks further when one considers that plenty of Kennedy associates expressed doubts about the Warren Report in 1964. Yet the vast majority of them went on to live long lives. Mary's unique combination of attributes, CIA ties, JFK lover, LSD advocate, certainly made her interesting, but did it make her a must-kill target? The hard evidence for that is lacking. On the flip side, a personal motive for a random attacker, while mundane, is easier to accept. Ray Crump Jr. had no known connection to Mary. If he was the killer, his motive might have been simple. He saw an attractive woman alone and either tried to assault her or rob her. When she fought back, he shot her in a panic. The lack of sexual assault or theft could mean he didn't get that far before the situation spiraled. The approach, the struggle, then the gunfire and fleeing once Wiggins appeared. Sadly, Washington, D.C. in the 1960s did see occasional violent crimes, even in good neighborhoods, and Crump, who lived in a rough part of the city, had a history of erratic behavior. It's worth noting that after being acquitted, Crump went on to commit other violent crimes, including the rape of a young girl. This demonstrated capacity for violence strongly suggests that, morally speaking, he was capable of Mary's murder as well. Let's weigh the evidence one last time. On the side of Crump or a lone perpetrator, we have The eyewitness identification. Imperfect but not insignificant. Crump's implausible explanation for being at the scene soaking wet. The fact that he put himself in that vicinity with no legitimate purpose. Fishing in a city canal on a weekday with no gear on him. And his later criminality, which profiles him as someone who could escalate to deadly violence. We also have the reality that nobody else has ever been incriminated. No deathbed confessions from CIA assassins. No colleague of Mary's coming forward with, "She told me the agency threatened her." Nothing but conjecture. On the side of conspiracy, we have Mary's remarkable connections and outspoken nature, circumstantial motive. The spooky diary retrieval by Angleton, suspicious behavior by CIA, though arguably to hide an affair, Mary's own fear that they were watching her, and the eerie timing after the Warren report. These facts suggest a plot, but don't prove one. Even Angleton's actions, arguably the shadiest confirmed part of this story, can be interpreted as personal cover-up rather than evidence he ordered a murder. Angleton may well have been genuinely concerned that Mary's diary could tarnish JFK's legacy or expose embarrassing details, so he took it upon himself, in terribly inappropriate fashion, to secure it. His mischief doesn't necessarily mean the CIA killed Mary. It more likely means the CIA was extremely keen to control information, something it indeed tries to do. As for the wiretapping of Mary's phone, reported by some sources, if true, it indicates the government kept tabs on her, but surveillance is a far cry from assassination. Mary might have been monitored due to her contacts with people like Leary or her anti-Vietnam pro-peace chatter. That doesn't automatically translate to a kill order. The agency could monitor many critics without harming them. When applying Occam's razor, the theory with the fewest leaps in logic is that Mary's death was a tragic intersection of her routine and random violence. It requires us to accept one coincidence, that an innocent person with high-profile links was randomly attacked. But history is full of grim coincidences. The conspiratorial view requires multiple elements to be true. A CIA team or contractor carried out the hit and managed to perfectly pin suspicion on Crump and has kept all participants silent for decades, and all of this over a diary or knowledge that has never surfaced. That's a lot of moving parts. It's not impossible, but it is improbable. As one observer noted, the Oliver Stone solution, conspiracy, smacks of the paranoid, and the pure random crime doesn't cover all particulars. I don't buy either. The truth may lie in between. Mary's murder may have been a crime of opportunity that was later enshrouded in secrecy by intelligence figures guarding their reputations. In other words, perhaps Ray Crump did kill Mary acting alone, and then CIA associates, knowing Mary's ties to JFK, hurried to retrieve her diary and hush up any collateral scandal. This scenario fits the evidence. It explains the lack of forensic proof beyond eyewitness accounts. Random crimes are often sloppy and hard to prove. And it explains the CIA's strange involvement afterward as a reactive measure, not necessarily as the cause of her death. Even Mary's own statements about people breaking into her house could relate to someone searching for that diary or files, either before or after her death, without implying they intended to kill her initially. To be sure, lingering ambiguities remain. If Crump was the killer, why exactly did he do it? He never confessed, so his precise motive died with him. Crump lived a troubled life and passed away in 2008, still maintaining his innocence. Also, how did he manage to leave no blood on him despite shooting Mary at close range? That detail, pointed out by Roundtree, is perplexing but not inexplicable. Depending on the angle of the shots and distance, it's possible to avoid spatter. The two shots, back and head, could have been fired from a short arm's length, minimizing blowback. The missing gun is another question mark. However, the canal and river were right there as a convenient dumping ground, and a small firearm could easily vanish in murky water or reeds. The eyewitness discrepancies, Crump's height, weight not matching initial reports, are troublesome, yet eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable under stress. Wiggins saw a crime in progress for a fleeting moment. Any number of factors, distance, lighting, assumption, could explain why he described a taller assailant at first. None of these ambiguities are insurmountable in the lone killer theory. They are the kinds of unresolved details common in many homicide cases. In contrast, the CIA theory's ambiguities are vast. Who precisely ordered it? Who pulled the trigger? Why leave an alive witness like Wiggins? Why not also eliminate Leary if he knew so much, etc.? Each question spawns another hypothetical answer, which in turn requires belief in a widening circle of silence and efficiency that strains credibility. After assessing means, motive, and opportunity, the most plausible explanation is that Mary Pinchot Meyer was killed by a single individual, most likely Ray Crump Jr., the very man acquitted of the crime, in a sudden eruption of violence. This conclusion aligns with the evidence we do have, even if it isn't as intriguing as the conspiracies. Crump had the opportunity, he was present at the scene, a possible motive, robbery or assault, and later behavior that shows he had a violent streak. Crucially, no verified evidence has ever tied any other person to pulling that trigger. In Mary's case, despite countless investigations by journalists and authors, no concrete smoking gun has emerged implicating Langley. It has remained in the realm of circumstantial suspicions and second-hand quotes. Occam's razor favors Crump. As painful as it is to accept, sometimes high-profile people become victims of ordinary crimes. That said, this conclusion does not erase the enigmatic aura of Mary's story. It's easy to understand why so many find the official outcome incomplete. Here was a woman at the confluence of Washington's most sensitive arenas: art, politics, covert intelligence, and her death came at a time of national turmoil and distrust. There is an undeniable mystique to the case. A secret diary burned, a CIA man at the crime scene, the timing with the JFK investigation. These facts will always invite speculation, and indeed they should. Healthy skepticism of authority is part of the legacy of the 1960s. Mary Pinchot Meyer's murder remains technically unsolved, and in that void, the imagination will continue to attend to the 100 little hints and byways of the story. But if we prioritize logic and evidence, the scales tip toward a tragic coincidence rather than a grand conspiracy. In the end, the most likely scenario is that Mary Meyer was the target of a lone predator, not a cabal. She fought for her life on that towpath, was fatally shot, and the culprit slipped away amid the confusion. The ensuing frenzy, CIA friends grabbing her diary, family shielding her secrets, created an air of mystery that amplified every coincidence into a conspiracy. It's an understandable human impulse. We want a significant cause for a significant person's death, but reality isn't always so poetic. Sometimes, as devastating as it is, the pieces don't form a tidy puzzle. Mary's story teaches us that unanswered questions do not automatically equal answers we'd prefer. They often simply remain unanswered. Thus, our verdict in this cold case leans toward the simplest explanation. However, we acknowledge the unanswered pieces, the missing gun, the diary intrigue, the what-ifs that keep the mystery alive. In a sense, Mary Pinchot Meyer's case symbolizes the dawn of American conspiracy culture, the moment when people realized the official story and the secret story can diverge. Whether or not one believes the other theories, Mary's fate left a residue of doubt that still echoes today.